Okay, let's get started. I don't know if I'm feeling more or less demoralized after that plenary session, but I appreciate everyone being here today. We are being video recorded, just for your awareness, and the name of this session is Farmland Protection, Tools, Funding Sources, and Success Stories. So my name's Kathleen Doherty. I'm here from American Farmland Trust. And my co-presenters are here. They'll introduce themselves a little later, but we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. Here's a quick outline of what we'll be covering today. There is a lot to talk about, so we're going to just jump right into the first item here, which is why protect farmland. So obviously, we all know farms provide a lot of benefits. I used to know a farmer in Connecticut who would say, without farms, we'd be hungry, naked, and sober. And farms do provide a lot of ecological benefits as well. I find myself kind of having to argue this case a little bit in the face of sort of more traditional open space conservation, but farmland can really provide ecological co-benefits. There's a lot of research out there about how farms can support biodiversity, and certain kinds of farming practices can also help mitigate climate change as well. In Massachusetts, we have the unfortunate distinction of being 6th in the country in terms of the percentage of farmland lost or converted to other uses. And we're also 3rd in the country for having the most expensive farmland per acre, tied with Connecticut. So farmland protection can really be a part of the solution here to help support farms in our state. I'm just including this slide here. It's a great resource from AFT in case you or your board needs further convincing. It's a web page called Why Save Farmland. And I am making a big effort to include a lot of links and resources on these slides. They're posted to the conference website, so if there's anything you want more information about, definitely use them as a resource, and check out the links on there as well. So we're going to take a very quick look at some best practices for farmland protection. And I'm going to focus right now on farm-friendly conservation restrictions and agricultural preservation restrictions. So when you are protecting farmland, you really want to make sure to tailor the terms of the CR or APR to the farm property you're protecting. So in terms of the purposes section of the CR or APR, the conservation values you're trying to protect are not just the soils, it's also the agricultural use and future ag viability of the farm property. So it follows that a farm-friendly restriction would allow for some amount of buildings for agriculture and some amount of commercial use because farming is a commercial activity. I am personally an advocate for including dwellings within the farmland restriction area. Not all programs allow you to do that, but I do consider it a best practice for the farmer to have somewhere to live, especially in New England where housing is so expensive. These are terms that you're probably familiar with if you've done any amount of farmland protection, but we'll very briefly talk about them. OPAV is the option to purchase at agricultural value, and then we also have the affirmative ag covenant. These are restriction terms that you can include. And I would say many farmland restrictions in Massachusetts include these terms. This slide is just a little more information about OPAV. This could be its own whole workshop, but very briefly, OPAV is intended as an affordability tool, and the purpose is to promote the transfer of agricultural land to a qualified farmer at the agricultural value. The Affirmative Agriculture Covenant, similarly complex, but really critical for protecting farms in Massachusetts. The purpose of this is to help ensure that land remains in agricultural production once it's protected. I'm going to breeze right past these two very complicated topics, but feel free to ask questions and use these slides as resources again. I'm going to briefly make a case here for land trust to lease land to farmers. Many farmers do rely on leased land, even if they also own land. So your land trust can really help support farmers in your service area by leasing fee land to farmers. And especially if you have any kind of DEI or social justice goals in your mission, it's really a great opportunity to potentially lease farmland and provide access to farmers from historically marginalized groups that might not otherwise have the opportunity. There are a ton of good resources out there for leasing land to farmers. Again, this could be its own whole topic, but I would encourage you to start with this booklet. I'm including, obviously we can't click the link now because it's not a webinar, but you can download the slides and look at this link. The booklet is literally called Leasing Land to Farmers, a Handbook for New England Land Trusts, Towns, and Municipalities and Institutions. So that's a great place to start. There's also resources for finding a farmer, crafting a good lease, long-term leases, ground leases, a lot of good resources out there. So this is the real meat of my portion of this presentation. We're going to talk about some farmland protection programs. And we are going to focus particularly on private APR. So first we'll compare MDAR APR versus private APR, then we'll compare a farm-friendly CR versus private APR, and then we're going to briefly touch on ASAP ALE and a couple other funding programs. This lovely slide is just some definitions of some of the many acronyms that we're using today. So first, let's compare MDAR APR versus private APR. So private APR is not a new tool, but I would say that it's been underutilized. And I'm going to make the case that it can potentially provide more control for the land trust and more flexibility as well. So the key difference here is that with an MDAR APR, the landowner applies to MDAR, the landowner negotiates with MDAR, MDAR holds the restriction. With a private APR, the land trust and or the municipality is the project lead. The landowner works with them directly, and the land trust and or municipality ends up holding that restriction. There is a big asterisk on this slide, and that is that I am hearing verbally from MDAR that there are new guidelines coming for private APR very soon. So they are the final word, but in general, I just want to give general information about the way private APR has worked to date. So some of the terms are different between MDAR APR and private APR. MDAR always requires OPAV these days. Private APR, OPAV is optional, at least as of now. The affirmative ag covenant is required for a private APR, but there's a little more flexibility in terms of how it's drafted and how it might be enforced. And there are some creative examples out there of private APRs with the affirmative ag covenant doing different things. Also, as of now, MDAR requires that residences be excluded from their APRs. Private APR has more flexibility that you could potentially include dwellings, which, again, for me, that's a best practice to be able to include the dwelling in the restriction area. So again, MDAR staff is the final word on private APR. We have several of them here, so you can say hi in person, but also I'm including a link for the contact sheet. They do work regionally, so you can find the person who works for MDAR who specializes in your region and get the scoop. I am also compiling resources in this private online community, which you are all invited to join. It's the Massachusetts Farmland Protection online community. And in addition to a library of downloadable resources, it's also a discussion forum with other practitioners in Massachusetts and also nationwide, so you can get answers from experts and just really get into the weeds with your projects together. And there's also some QR codes, so if you wanted to sign up on your phone, you could do that today. Now let's briefly compare private APR versus a farm-friendly CR. So many land trusts do start with a CR, the model CR template, for farmland protection projects. And I think we're going to see some examples of that in our case studies. I think there's potential for private APR to offer a little bit more flexibility in terms of farm-friendly terms for the restriction. So here's kind of a comparison between the two. So currently with private APR, you can draw language from not just the model CR, but also from the APR language. You can draw from your own sort of best practices at your land trust in terms of drafting the restriction. And there are some opportunities to include more farm-friendly restrictions like the OPAV, which is not necessarily allowed if you're going through the CR. No public access is required for private APR, which is potentially a good thing for a lot of privately owned farms to give the farmer the ability to keep the public off the land if they choose. And here's the real best thing about private APR is that it is reviewed and approved by MDAR rather than going through the traditional CR review process with the EEA, which as of right now is much quicker. And I think Ron is here. He's the person that, yes, thank you. So it's also just a little bit easier of a process. And especially now with the CR backlog, it's a great alternative to a traditional CR, much quicker and more flexible. So now I'm going to quickly spin through some funding programs for farmland, and then I'm going to pass it off to my co-presenters here for case studies. So ASAP ALE is a farm bill program. It's administered by USDA, and it is money for farmland protection. MDAR is the #1 applicant for ASAP ALE in Massachusetts, but land trusts and municipalities and tribes are also eligible. And I'm here to make the case that it is a great potential funding source and potentially a great match for private APR. So I'm not going to get into too much detail because I have given several webinars about ASAP ALE that are recorded online, and this link is to look at those recordings. The ASAP ALE toolkit is also a great resource. I have some information up here if you want to take it, and this link goes to like this beautiful online compendium of ASAP ALE resources on the toolkit. I also want to flag this brand new website on the AFT page that is just full of information about farmland protection resources for Massachusetts, including farmland of local importance. So check that out as well. So back to ALE. If you've heard any of my webinars, you will know that ASAP ALE can pay for up to 50% of the value of the restriction. The remaining 50% can be a bargain sale if the landowner is up for that, or you can match with other funding sources. This is how MDAR uses it. So when MDAR applies for ALE, they are funding typically 50% of the value of the APR with ASAP ALE. Sometimes they get a local match, and then the balance is paid by MDAR. Your land trust can also do that. Private APR currently does not have a funding source. We keep hearing rumors about it again, but currently there's no funding attached, but you could use funding from other sources to match the ALE, or you could do a bargain sale. If you work with ASAP ALE, you're required to include their minimum deed terms, which Those are sort of the minimum language you need to include as part of the restriction. But luckily, ALE is a program for farmers, and it is pretty farm-friendly, these minimum deed terms. So you are required to allow limited commercial use, including ag and forestry. You have the option to include buildings within a fixed building envelope. There's a limitation on impervious surfaces, which helps protect the farmland soils. And there is a third-party right of enforcement to the U.S. government, which actually can really strengthen the stewardship of that easement if there is any kind of a legal challenge. The minimum deed terms are also flexible, though, and they allow for a lot of different options. You can choose to allow agricultural and or residential structures. You can choose to include OPAV or not. You can choose to include the affirmative ag covenant, and you can allow or be silent on public access as you choose. I do have, this is like a silly thing to print out, but I do have some like copies of the minimum deed terms if you want to look at them. Probably better to read them on the computer, but some of us are big nerds about it, so you're welcome to take one if you want. But you can kind of see that ASAP ALE encompasses a lot of farm-friendly language, as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, and it can potentially be a great match for private APR. I'm almost done, and I'm just going to breeze through these last slides. Some land trusts do use conservation partnership or other state grants to fund farmland protection. There are pros and cons to that approach. Mostly it's just that these DCS grant programs are not designed for farmland. So depending on the project, it may or may not end up being a good fit. Municipalities can be really great partners for farmland protection. Municipalities can be the lead applicant for ASAP ALE and or private APR. And or they can partner with land trusts and be co-applicants. CPA can be a really great source of funding for private APR. There's some great case studies that I'm linking here. I'm not going to get into the weeds with all this, but definitely consider a potential partnership with your local municipality. Okay, these are my last couple slides. This is just a table comparing the program requirements for APR, private APR, and ASAP ALE. And I'm going to put a big asterisk again, which is that the private APR guidance is about to be updated. And I won't read the slide to you, but we're comparing the eligibility requirements for each program, the application requirements, who holds the restriction, what are the required terms for the restriction, how are structures treated, and what is the local match funding required. So download these slides, use them as a resource, and I'm going to pass it off to Nick for our first case studies here.
Kathleen, are you available to help people?
No. Yes, my... They warned me how delicate this mic is, so now I'm fumbling it.
I got one part.
Thank you. Okay. So yes, part of my job is helping people with farmland protection projects. I work for American Farmland Trust, so I don't do land protection. I help you guys do land protection. So I'm happy to respond to questions with my business card, and we're also going to take a lot of questions at the end. Or a video at your face, or just give me the mic. Situated. Thank you.
On this side too. Whatever's better. Okay, go. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Pitel. I'm Director of Conservation with Berkshire Natural Resources Council. For those that may not know, BNRC is a regional conservation land trust. We work throughout and exclusively in Berkshire County, which is the westernmost county abutting New York. We've conserved nearly 27,000 acres of land since our inception, where we were established in 1967. Out of that, we've protected nearly half of it through conservation restrictions and a couple private APRs. The first one that we did was in the late 90s. The most recent one was in 2024, which I'll touch on as part of the case studies. We also own over 13,000 acres in fee, where we manage 60 plus miles of trails across 57 properties. We've also assisted numerous partners in conservation of farmland, wildlife habitat, forest land, watershed, and recreational lands. And out of it, we've helped protect over 5,000 acres of farmland. BNRC's mission is conserving and caring for Berkshire lands, waters, and wildlife, and connecting people with nature for a more vibrant, shared future. So why farmland in Berkshire County? First of all, we have a really large land base, and a lot of it is operated by dairy farms. And of those farms, a lot of those dairy farms are struggling. Most of those farmland owners are over age 65 and don't yet have a transition succession plan set up in place that could help protect the farm for future, not only farm viability, but their own security. And so 80% of Berkshire County's agricultural land is currently unprotected, and out of the open space, only 40% is permanently protected. Also, Berkshire County, though we have a lot of prime farmland soils in the river valley, we have a lot of available farmland in the hilly uplands that don't quite meet all of the soil eligibility criteria that the typical funding sources look at for eligibility. It's also very attractive to developers. Across the state, 10% of farmland loss occurred between 2012 and 2017, and a lot of that has since been occurring from the pandemic. We saw a huge boom, which I'm sure happened statewide, but Berkshire County in particular saw a massive increase in second home buyers and people moving upstate from New York City or west out of Boston, where land values significantly exploded. And so I just put up here the projections for the conversion of farmland from basically 2016 through 2040. And you can see that most of Berkshire County, most of the acreage projected for development is low density residential development. So case study number one is a private APR. It was 125 acres in New Marlborough, and I just need to say that I have walked a lot of farmland in Massachusetts and in New York State where I grew up, and this has been some of the most pristine quality hay fields I've ever walked on. The project details for this were that being a private APR, the landowner maintains ownership and the currently, yeah.
Could you stay closer to the microphone?
Yep, sorry. Private APR, like Kathleen touched on, landowner maintains ownership and currently leases it to a farmer. The restriction was donated, so we didn't have to seek funding sources to do part of the acquisition. The private APR itself is co-held between Berkshire Natural Resources Council and our local land trust partner, which was the New Marlborough Land Trust. And again, it protected high quality hay fields in perpetuity because it has that affirmative ag covenant. It also has a quality forest resource component on a separate parcel. And this particular project was decades in the making. The previous owner, which was the father, had been in discussions with MDAR about an APR, had been in discussions with BNRC about a CR, and right when the final phases of that project were going to occur, he passed away. And the deal fell apart. It transitioned to his kids, and nobody could make a deal happen. Since then, the kids subdivided and sold portions of the property, and then were in a place where they could benefit from a tax deduction, and came back to BNRC and said they'd like to see if the property can be conserved. And because of that, we had a really short time frame. They approached us initially in July, seeing if this was feasible, which for those of you who do land conservation, that is a very tight window to get it done by the end of the calendar year. And so They contacted us, and we initially went out on the property to figure out what the best potential options were. Part of the complexity around this was that these parcels highlighted in red are not their only parcels associated with the property. They had it subdivided and parcelized, so we were trying to figure out, based on their interest, what could work for them, as well as protecting the land. BNRC and New Marlboro Land Trust got together and immediately inquired with MDAR about whether or not this private APR could be feasible in this amount of time. MDAR did initial site visit with us very early on in the fall, where we were able to outline the necessary steps that really needed to pinpoint basically a go, no-go phase for how quickly we could get this done. The crucial aspect of this was that right after that site visit with MDAR, BNRC and New Marlboro Land Trust decided to essentially divide and conquer. We let New Marlboro Land Trust focus the continuing relationship and discussions with the landowners, while BNRC focused on speaking with MDAR, laying out the goals that MDAR needed to see in the private APR, and also shoring up consultants for like the baseline report to get it on schedule. Then we drafted the APR through utilizing a private consultant. And basically the tool for this was taking the state's CR template, elevating a lot of the agricultural use language to the forefront of that template, basically changing everywhere that the word conservation restriction was used, switching it with agricultural preservation restriction. The landowners had to get surveys completed for where they wanted lots to be excluded out of some of these parcels that were yet not in this configuration. And then additionally, we had to get access easements because of the various lot configurations, one of which was that there's in between the two properties was the original house site that had been sold out separately that had a partial access easement but not fully accessible from the road. And further complicating it was that it was a third party. But luckily we were able to get that done. And so basically by December of 2023, we got the baseline completed, the landowners got their appraisal completed, and we were able to close the APR. So again, laying out the complexities, the extremely short time frame. Also, multiple non-local landowners. It was 3 siblings, all residing in different states, none of which were Massachusetts. The parcel configuration was quite a challenge, getting the access easements, particularly across that other ownership parcel. And then additionally, because the private APR has to meet the Chapter 61 definitions of agricultural use to be a private APR, we were required to put in there the forage stewardship plan component on the forest land parcel because it was all entirely forest land. Why it worked, we had a very collaborative and open dialogue with the partner land trust, really effective communication with MDAR, and motivated landowners that could take that donation, so they didn't want to see it fall apart either. And then again, the conservation tool, the private APR, if it was a CR, there's absolutely no way we could have gotten it done in that time frame because we did not have to go through that whole review process with EEA. It was strictly with MDAR and their commissioner signing off on it. Next case study was a BiProtect cell on Many Forks Farm in Clarksburg, Mass., which is in the very northwest corner of the state. It was on 18 acres, a very well and successfully established CSA with prime farmland soils. This was a project that stemmed from farmer transition and the need for land security. And shout out to Sharon Wyrick, who's here in the room, who was the prior owner of this property. And I will point out her forethought in the next slide. But This project, again, buy, protect, sell, that enables farm transition with land security. We have an executed short-term lease on the property to the new farmer, and it incorporates not only the farmhouse, but that farmhouse has processing space included with it, so it's a viable component of the farm business. Other conservation values, like Kathleen touched on, it has significant wildlife habitat values. It is along the north branch of the Hoosick River, which is biomap core habitat for aquatic and rare species in the state. It's also a cold water fishery resource and has significant floodplain and riparian forest habitat. This timeline, luckily, a little better. Again, Sharon approached BNRC with really concrete, well-planned goals for conserving the property. She wanted successful farm transition and viability of the farming operation, was really strongly advocating to ensure that the house stayed with the farm, and wanted the farmland to remain affordable for a future farmer. We immediately got to work and got initial board approval to at least just explore this, because we had not really done this level of buy, protect, sell. And out of that came a subcommittee with some board members, BNRC staff, and other partners, that some of which are in the room. And so, you know, we kind of originally brainstormed like what the various options could be before we landed on buy, protect, sell. We looked up ground leases, other models and mechanisms that other partners in other states had utilized, and landed on the buy, protect, sell option being the best fit for this particular project. In May of 2023, the new farmer was identified, which really came to fruition through the partners' outreach efforts in our succession planning and conservation tools workshops that we hosted around the county. Sharon met the new farmer at one of those sessions, and the new farmer was Molly Comstock, who was really in Berkshire County one of the poster childs for basically getting kicked off of all of her leased farmland in southern Berkshire County. And so they were able to coordinate together and work out a process that worked for them to then approach us so that we could better set up this project for success. We also embarked on a small fundraising campaign to help with due diligence cost, other project funding components, and then also created an LLC basically to protect BNRC, because we would be owning and holding infrastructure assets on the farm. So that was another layer of protection for BNRC. So again, approached in January of 2023. By February of 2024, we were able to purchase the property with the LLC at a bargain sale, thank you to Sharon, which included the improvements on the farm, the house, and some other equipment and whatnot, and then immediately set up a lease and option agreement with the new farmer to be on the land. In 2026, there's a farm viability covenant with MDAR that expires, and so we're exploring how best to protect the property and convey it to the new farmer, likely through the manner of purchasing a private APR, but also considering a farm-friendly CR. Those details are going to be worked out in the next year or so. For this project, just wanted to throw up here, because it was pretty unique, just general project budget. So we acquired the property at a bargain sale at just shy of $315,000, over $6,000 in closing costs, and then just under $15,000 in due diligence. So that was our acquisition budget for the project. And then we also budgeted additionally $30,000 for roughly 3 years of ownership, to include property maintenance, home repair costs, insurance on the property, insuring the leasing farmer on the property, as well as additional survey and legal costs likely to incur. We've structured the farm lease agreement where the current farmer, her monthly lease payments will eventually go towards the purchase of the farm. And additionally, it covers the structure and taxes and all of that. And then hoping to then be able to purchase a private APR or CR in the next year and a half once that farm viability covenant expires. Funding sources for this project, we relied on private foundational funding for various aspects, but we also relied on BNRC reserve funding. We were fortunate enough that we could utilize a lot of our own resources to do this initial purchase. And then we started a Berkshire Farm Fund campaign to help with some of the outlying costs, as well as build up funding to be able to do future projects like this, which, you know, we really saw an increase in new donors. They weren't huge amounts of money, but just increase in new donors with their interest in funding projects like this. And then again, we're hoping for funding to be able to purchase a private APR or CR after that covenant expires. My third case study for today is a donated conservation restriction. This one we just finished in the last couple weeks. This was a project 5 years in the making, but really great landowner, wanted to see their property conserved, and they just did a straight up donation of a conservation restriction on 52 acres of land in Lenox. It has really great habitat value as well as ag land value. Currently and long time hay fields, there's nesting bobolinks in the field, so the farmer does delayed mowing and takes one cutting off in the fall. And then we structured the conservation restriction here to not require a farm conservation plan unless it was transitioned to another use outside of the current farmland use, just because we felt like they didn't really need a conservation plan for continuing to hay it like they've been doing for decades. But I'll show in the next slide the quality of the forest land habitat as well is pretty unique. It has a lot of maple sugaring or sugar maple stand at the base, and then it goes up this like ridge line that's called the pinnacle in Lenox. That's a pretty unique habitat feature. So I'll point that out as well. So this is the landowner overlooking her farm fields and overlooking October Mountain State Forest, which again, you can imagine the development value for some of those views. Again, forest land features, the pinnacle going up there, which also abuts a BNRC held property, which was another reason why it was a really great opportunity for us to expand our land protection portfolio on existing protecting landscape. BNRC also utilizes farmland leases on fee land that we own. We have a smaller farm property in Richmond that we've owned for years that we've started leasing out to some local farmers, and we're in process of trying to utilize ways that can better accommodate their needs. And so we've set up rolling leases, which are essentially, if I have this right, since I'm not the person in our organization who's setting them up, but it's sort of like a 10-year option that kind of renews, as long as we don't exercise the option to change the use. And then also establishing longer lease terms really help the farmers be able to apply for a lot of grant fundings, whether it be through MDAR or NRCS grants. We also, as part of those grant applications, our staff is able to go on the site visits, help answer any questions or assist them with questions being the actual landowners of the property. And then we've also really tried restructuring the leases to make their payments due later after the growing season is over with, so that we're not hounding them while they're in their busiest season. And that's my last slide.
make that easy. Oh my goodness. No, it doesn't. Sorry about that. Hi, everybody.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, it's not a.
Oh man. Yeah. I was gonna put it there.
Okay, here.
Thank you. Is it left and right?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's John Chester. I'm a real estate project manager with the Buzzards Bay Coalition in southeastern Massachusetts. My role is basically supporting acquisitions projects. I do some property and construction project management, and then also a significant amount of this facilitating these farmland protection projects. The Buzzards Bay Coalition, we're a membership-supported organization in southeastern Mass, where our mission is to support the health and healthy use and sustainable use and restoration of the bay and its watershed area. We do that through education, outreach, advocacy, and also land protection work. Our general strategy for land protection focuses on the most vulnerable streams and wetlands and salt marshes and stuff in the area. But these ag projects are kind of a facet and like a part of this overall larger strategy. And we have some really tall photographers, as you'll see in these pictures. So I think this is kind of, I think I might have put these out of order a little bit, but this is basically, just for scale, so the watershed is that area basically. So south coast of Dartmouth, Westport, and then kind of going over up into New Bedford, Onset, and then down along the Cape and some of the portions of the Elizabethan Islands. The three projects I'm going to kind of go over briefly there's two little green dots down there. Those are both down in Dartmouth. That's the Tavares farm and the Wainer farm. And then there's a little green dot up in the middle there on the Acushnet-Rochester border. That is the Paul farm. So Tavares was kind of a standard, I guess, ALE bargain sale project. Wainer farm is a little bit more complicated. There was kind of a buy, protect, sell factor to it as well. And then the Paul farm is a little bit different. It doesn't use the federal funding sources, but we were able to, it was really a drinking water supply DCS funded project that as a bonus, we wound up with a farm that we wanted to get rid of. These projects represent a couple hundred acres, including over 90 acres of agricultural fields. The remainder of that is forest and wetlands, which is kind of shows how it supports our overall acquisition and protection strategy. So this is in here just kind of, why are we doing this if we're worried about watershed quality and protection? Farms are a big part of the culture of the South Coast and southeastern Mass. On the southwestern side, it's big open fields and hay and vegetables. And then we don't get into it in this speech, but there's a lot of cranberry country in the eastern side of the watershed. So in the past 25 years, we've protected over 10,000 acres of land, and I think we're just over 900 acres actually of ag fields now. But as Nick was saying, our area is also highly susceptible to development and conversion of these agricultural fields. Most of them have a lot of frontage, a lot of easy development potential. As these graphs show, even with our work, optimistically, Bristol and Plymouth County, which is the majority of the watershed, is going to lose over 15,000 acres in the next 15 years, basically. So this is the first project. This is down in Dartmouth. This is the Tavares farm. This is over almost 150 acres. The majority of the fields are in this image, and then the surrounding area is part of the land as well. This one, the family agreed to protect their land, so they retain ownership of the site. They granted Buzzards Bay Coalition a CR with agricultural permissions in it. So the way we do this, I know you guys mentioned keeping the improvements in the restriction area. The way we do this, you'll see on the next slide, but for us, due to the lack of conservation values and the difficulty of monitoring it and stewarding it, we usually try to keep the actual structures and the driveways within the parcel, but outside of the protected area, if that makes sense. The funding on this was, thankfully the family was willing to do a bargain sale, so it was basically, we were able to purchase it for half the development price of the land, purchase the CR, excuse me. So this is the site. So that's kind of, we were looking south before towards the bay, but that's kind of a better idea of what you were looking at. And what the red area is now under this conservation restriction. The blue area is not restricted, but as I said, is still the same parcel. The conservation restriction extinguishes any ability to further subdivide the property. So there's not really a way to sell it separately from, the whole thing is encumbered by the idea. It's just you don't have to go by the CR restrictions inside that space. That's a broader kind of, this is the Westport River over here. This is the very top of the Slocum's River, which is a tidal river. You can kind of see that this is a big chunk of land right in the middle of other protected lands. So this is really nice, kind of combining protected spaces together. General idea of the timeline on this. So I started at BBC in 2023, but I think they had been speaking with these landowners for decades. I'm not sure the exact timeline, but it was a long time coming. But in fall of 2022, we were able to reach an agreement to purchase of the conservation restriction on the land for half of the development value. That lines up coincidentally with what USDA's ALE program will provide. So right when we did that, we also applied through the USDA ALE program. In 2023, we ranked well, and we were hoping to get obligated for funding for this project and close the deal in 2023. But as a large parcel, as a high value, even a 50% development value was a large number that was more than what was in the state's USDA pot that year. So it got deferred to 2024, which was a little bit stressful because our purchase and sales agreement was supposed to be, we had to get an extension. We had to try, the farmers were doing a really good service for the community, but they were also facing their own health and family pressures and stuff like that. So we were able to, but for me, I didn't know what I was doing with the ALE process at the time, so it gave me a year to figure out what I needed to submit, which was helpful. So
now you're a pro.
Yeah. But yeah, so that gave us time to put together all the due diligence. So for one of these, it's you're working with the USDA to, similar to a straight grant, they're going to review all your due diligence on the project. They're going to make sure that you have a good appraisal that fits their credibility, that you have to do the full survey work, including laying out that restriction area, baseline documentation report, all that kind of stuff. So by the spring of 2024, we actually had all that ready to go, and we were ready to move forward. We didn't have the CR submitted yet, but we found out we were obligated, and we put that CR in, and we pushed as hard as we possibly could to get the thing closed. We were going to lose this deal in like November of last year. So we were able to get the CR out and close it on Halloween, which was really a weird, odd holiday to finish a protection project. So yeah, this is this project summary. So 150 acres. Like I said, when we're looking at this is also kind of, as Nick was mentioning, there's significant amounts of this site where biomap, core habitat, and critical natural landscape, and also there was a cold water brook coming out the western side of it. So this was a farmland protection project, but really, from our perspective, we were also hitting a lot of the conservation values that we are trying to protect. And the funding was basically, the purchase price was through the USDA's ALE project, and we covered the due diligence costs.
Can you give us an idea of how much?
Yeah.
Can you tell us how much? What was the price?
The purchase price? It was like around, the total price of the conservation area was around $4 million, but the value, so it was half of that basically. So, yeah, so when in that first picture you see all that's all upland along the road right there, and those are all, house lots are $400,000 there, $500,000. So this is the second one. This is the Wayner farm, which is A little bit south of the Tavares property in the same town, Dartmouth. This is the Slocum's River in the back here. That's Buzzards Bay out in the background. This is a really, really nice part of Dartmouth. It's all, beautiful open fields. And this project is more of it's a small size, but it was more of just an agricultural protection project. Same kind of general idea where the CR includes language that's permitting ag use. It's not heavily restrictive. The house and the barn are in the center right there. So that's a 3-bedroom house and like a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot commercial barn. I didn't get a chance to put any pictures in, but really like a great support structure to have. This originally was owned by the Sid Wainer Food Distribution Company. So this was like which is like a big fancy, food distributor in all of Eastern Massachusetts. And like if you buy arugula at a fancy restaurant in Boston, it was from Sid Wainer kind of stuff. And this is one of the sites they had that they use it to grow, they would support their farm. And then the structures were like, it looked like the food company inside, it looked like it'd be like on a TV show inside the house. So it's kind of a weird property. So this went on the market in 2020. So this one is a USDA, it's an ale program, but it's got a buy, protect, sell component to it. So in this case, we stepped in and bought the property off the open market, short term, went through the ALE due diligence process, and then resold it to an eligible farmer. So the eligible farmer is designated by the USDA as a farmer, and they have to also be able to they make sure that they can handle the restrictions in the CR before they will allow them to be the next landowner.
Second in the nation.
Yeah, I don't want to slap myself in the back too hard. So the Buy Protect Sell program is new. It only opened up in the last couple of years, and they take longer because there's so many components to them besides just the protection project. This was the second one in the nation after a project in Vermont to close. So we were racing neck and neck with them, but they beat us by a month or two. So so that was great. So this is same general idea. So this is the same thing where this is one single property piece, but the CR only covers that outer area. So it cannot be sold separately. So that's, this is,
So across the street can't be sold separately?
that's a separate parcel. That's not the same parcel.
You're meaning the exclusion can't be sold separately from?
Yeah, this exclusion cannot be sold separately from this. It's one tax parcel. Same idea. So the Tavares farm is just off the northwest corner over there. This was listed. This was actually a larger property at one point. There was multiple components to this parcel that got broken up over time. This portion was listed for sale in 2022. There's a lot of interest. This is like the peak of the real estate market, the COVID market down there. That same thing where it's all, that's potential house lots, 6 or 7 of them in a row right there. So we bought it in 2023 after entering a purchase sales agreement. We held it. We used the house to support staff. We rented it to staff members, and that kind of helped with some of the carrying costs of the site. And we rented the fields to local fields in the barn to local farmers. Moved the CR through the state and federal review process from April 23 till last December, basically. Last spring, we put out an RFP requesting bids from farmers or agricultural users to buy the whole property. There's a lot of interest. We had a lot of bids, a lot of interested folks. The highest ranked bidder was selected in June 2024 to try to negotiate a purchase and sales agreement. We used in-house qualitative and quantitative analysis of their bids and also people from the local ag community. And then we start moving the landowner through to make sure they can actually be the person to buy the property. That's not, it can't just be someone who's not registered with the FSA or registered with the NRCS. We got that going. We moved that CR through the state process, and we're ready to close in December of last year, and we were able to do that. So the way that technically works is that we sell the fee to the whole property to the new landowner, and at the same table, they grant us a conservation restriction for nominal value. We get reimbursement for the CR from the federal government. So we're fronting it the whole time. It's an expensive thing. We were able to fund this through a combination of, we were able to have a combination of private and conventional financing to kind of allay the carrying cost of the project. The rental helped, but the AL was really the big piece that made it so that we were able to resell it for a price that was likely below what the top end value for it was. We listed it at the number that would make the project break even, was basically the idea. So we tried to sell it for as inexpensively as possible. So, and this is the last one. This one I started with drinking water supply protection because that's the main focus of this project, but it came with a farm getting protected and sold as well. So this one is 35 acres. About 27 acres is going to be under a permanent conservation restriction. The goal of that restriction is to protect the drinking water supply for the town of a municipal partner, the town of Marion. And so that's basically facing that way. This is a long, skinny lot. So the back of that is all zone 2 wellhead protection area, back in the back there. We carved off this area roughly. It's about 7 acres. We did an A&R, a subdivision process, and resold that to a farmer. There's a small portion of the CR that's going to allow agricultural uses that are compatible with that funding source. So they're going to be organic, mostly. It's basically that front field. So that's what it is now. And this is a little bit different. It's the same color, so it's kind of confusing, but that red outline is a different parcel that we created and sold. And this green area is the part that we're going to put under conservation restriction. The zone 2 the wellhead protection area is really from here back down. So the field use up there is almost a third, a little bit over a third of a mile away. So it's, we're trying to keep these as heavily separated as possible. This parcel is in Rochester. This is the Mattapoisett River coming down here. So this is the Mattapoisett River is a priority protection area for us. And these drinking water areas, Rochester has a lot of drinking water protection area, and there are wells in Rochester that provide water for the towns of Acushnet, Marion, Mattapoisett, and Fairhaven. So it's a really important area to try to keep the land, where we can keep it protected and keep those wells to be sustainable and keep them usable. This one was fast too. We had a busy year this year. This is kind of the same as the Wayner project. It went on sale and it was listed, and it was highly likely to sell quickly. We were able to identify just based off of that other route. This could have been a good candidate for an ale as well, based on the soils, but we were already frequent customers with them, and we were trying to figure out a different way to do it. So we signed the PNS. The PNS was contingent on funding sources going through. Take ownership in spring of this year. Divided the parcel. Marketed the farmlet for sale. I want to make sure, this one was not an RFP. It is a farmlet, but we were selling it. We were trying to maximize what we could get out of it. The house is in rough condition, so it's not it wasn't going to be the easiest thing to move right into and occupy, I guess. And that's just being realistic about the project. But it did end up getting sold to a local farmer who raises cattle, show cattle, and it does like a small meat production thing. So it worked out. But right now, this project's not finished, so the sale has been done, but we are still we're still going through the final approval of the CR. And we plan to lease that front 6 acres. Right now it's looking like it's going to be the new neighbor. So that's a good kind of, they're doubling the land that they get basically for the price. And once again, this CR is going to be pretty restrictive on the ag use on that portion of the site. It's not going to be fully. I think it's going to have to follow organic practices. So the sale of the drinking water, or the CR funded by the drinking water grant, is going to cover about 35% of the project. Resale of the house with the excess land that we gave it is going to cover the other 55%, and then the private campaign is basically funding the due diligence and the work to get this done, the hours to get it done. So I just thought this was kind of an interesting one that doesn't, it's using like a state grant model kind of, but I just thought it was a kind of it can be done, I guess, hopefully. Yeah, that's it.
So we're going to do
Maybe leave it on the table. So
Yeah.
probably 10 minutes of questions, and then I have like 2 slides to wrap us up.
So every time I think I know what ASAP is, somebody says something that makes me realize I don't really understand it. So could somebody give a 1-sentence description of each program and how you would go about deciding which path to take? Or does that even make sense?
I could do the ale part, I guess.
Yeah.
So ASAP is the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. There's,
Might need to use both.
oh,
Well, this mic is for the video, and that mic's for the room, so.
I'm gonna go back over there. All right, we'll just play musical chairs. So ASAP is the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program run through the USDA's NRCS. So it's an alphabet soup, but then there's 2 things in there. There's the WRE, which we're not going to worry about, that's wetland stuff, and then ALE, which is agricultural land easements. And as far as I understand, the main, those are looking, when you apply for that, you're looking at the soils underlying the site. Basically, that's their biggest, there's other factors that go into it, but that you want to make sure that you have either USDA soils or, prime soils or unique soils or soils of local importance. And as far as I understand it, that's the main thing they're looking at. There's a lot of other factors, but.
Yeah, I would say so.
Right, so ASAP is
Yeah,
like
what's
the
your
umbrella,
question?
it's the umbrella under which ALE
Yeah.
is, and then, so maybe the question is, when would you apply for that versus going for an APR? Is that more of a soils question?
No,
No.
so APR is often used as ALE. So yes, please, Chris, save us.
Things is a lot of land trusts don't have the 50% match
Yeah.
that's required.
Yeah.
So they come to the program and we provide the 50% match and go through the ALE process.
Yeah,
Right.
So you guys help us go through the process, but then we bold the restriction. So if you had the 50% match, you could go to ALE yourselves and hold the restriction.
Right.
that's a great answer.
Yeah, like the Tavares property, that's a great example of, that was all dependent on the landowner being willing to make that bargain sale. That was not going to work, if they wanted the full value of their property.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so-
ALE, if you do it as the land trust, you get a lot more control versus working with MDAR. MDAR is driving the bus because it's their money and their program, obviously. But ALE, yeah.
Yeah, I would just say a lot of it depends on project timeline, cost of the project, what your land trust has capacity to do. If you've never held an agricultural easement before, probably not applying directly to ALE is your best start. So it really all depends.
I disagree.
Yeah, so follow up on that, sorry. But, so, working with MDAR, they handle all the,
Monitoring into the future.
well, but also when you're doing the APR, you guys handle all the NRCS communications. So when you're doing an ALE, is the land trust doing all that communication with NRCS? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Kathleen can help you.
Thanks, Jamie. Yes, but I can help with that aspect of it. Yes.
But
Okay.
you have more flexibility in creating the actual easement document.
Right. But also more
Correct.
responsibility in terms of stewardship. Yeah. Okay. Back.
Oh, sure, go back.
Yeah. Let's go to the back.
I wanted to follow up on that. Thank you for a great question, Ms. Collins. But I wanted to make sure I understand too. So with ALE, you could do a farm-friendly CR and fund it with ALE funds. Am I understanding that right? Could you also do a private APR and fund it with ALE?
Sure could.
Yes, as long as the minimum deed terms of the ALE are in that CR or private APR.
Yeah. It's a federal program. They don't really care what state route you go, as long as you meet their restriction terms.
They also don't have a template, so it's just those deed terms, so you can incorporate it into whatever, like the state template or your own private APR template that gets approved.
So the 50% match, MDR is providing not the other 50% entirely, they're providing like 50% of the 50% match, or like how does that play
Christiana?
out?
Could you repeat the question?
So the question is about what the match requirements are utilizing MDAR funding versus strictly ALE funding, because ALE funding only will cover 50% of the cost of that restriction purchase.
Right. So it's 50% of the APR value.
Yeah. So MDAR will pay usually 40 to 45%.
Right. We pay the full value up front, and we get reimbursed through NRCS.
Right, but there is
45 to 50%.
a local match.
Generally, yeah. There's
Yeah.
generally a local match.
So I think it's roughly fair to say that, like, if you go MDAR APR, which can utilize ALE funding, it's roughly like an 85% purchase,
Yeah.
basically. Yes.
So you mentioned that you have a farmer forward CR. And John, I know you mentioned that you have a CR that allows farming practices. So can you define for me what is a farmer forward CR to you? And what, John, if you can define what you mean by these are pro-farm, farm forward.
Yeah, so they're probably similar, even though I haven't read what Buzzards Bay Coalition's farm-friendly CRs are. But basically, so if you've looked at the state CR template, it's more geared and front-loaded towards the habitat side of protection side of things, and then there's an agricultural section that's tacked onto it, whereas the farm forward CR is just reorganizing that and restructuring it to where the agricultural use and protections are at the forefront of it versus starting with the habitat. Doesn't mean that the habitat protections aren't still in there. It's just reordering the structure of the conservation restriction.
And adding things like permanent ag covenants and stuff.
Yeah, which is an option if that's the route that you go. There's also, varying degrees of how to structure exclusions and whatnot too.
Can I follow up? So
Sure.
have you heard back from the farmers whether they consider it farm forward? I mean, I get it's a technical, you're putting the farm stuff forward, but I'm thinking as a farmer and a farmer organization, how can we better serve farmers with these CRs so that farmers can actually stay on the land and they're not being limited and not able to grow? So I'm just asking what you're doing to interact with the farmers to figure out how we keep farmers farming and not restrict them in some ways with these CRs.
Yeah, so I'll speak and then you can, I guess, chime in, John. For the donated farm-friendly CR that I mentioned, it was a pretty dual use of habitat value and still allowing agricultural practices. It still allows for limited ag structures to be utilized. This one, I will say, was not like pristine farmland. It was pretty much only ever hay fields, and it was already being managed in a way that could be utilized for hay, but also wildlife habitat. And so, we didn't put the affirmative ag covenant in that CR because if the leasing farmer or a new owner decides they don't want to farm it, it doesn't have to be kept in farming. But we added some other provisions in there, like that we as the CR holder can exercise a right to keep it open and or maintain it for wildlife habitat if that's something that we choose to do.
The agricultural use, agricultural activities language that's in like the template CR, the state CR, is what we typically use. We usually don't get more restrictive than that, and that's, we haven't made a push to change that language, but it is fairly, it's not super restrictive as far as I understand it from the farmers I've discussed it with. But I think that would be a place for, if farmers wanted input on what these CRs are going to do to the ability to use the land agriculturally, reviewing that language, and maybe, I can't tell them to talk to anybody, but I would say that I can't change that language, without, we need input from the farmers as well, so.
Robin?
be available in 2 years?
Yeah, we need a new farm bill, so I don't know.
We hope.
Farm bill's pretty bipartisan. I don't know. We'll see. But you know, it's a long-standing program. They might cut funding without cutting the program entirely. You know, so it remains to be seen.
I mean, we currently have projects in process that have not been stopped, so I can't say yes or no, but we haven't tried to go to a closing since last November, I guess. Or, well, since January.
Help me out with the terminology here. A private APR, can that be held by a local Concom?
It can be held by a municipality.
Okay, so the word private doesn't mean like
Correct.
private land trust.
Correct.
It's not MDR.
Right. It just
Yes.
means not end up. Okay.
Anyone other
Thank
than. We had a follow-up back there, and then I think we'll wrap.
I was just going to ask another funding question, following up on the ALE funds and things. Do I understand that they are funded right now under the current farm bill through a period of time? Will you vote unless others guarantee that?
They had a round for fiscal year 25. That was, the deadline was in December. There might be additional money from that this fiscal year. And then after that, it's like up to Congress. So, yeah, a little tricky. There are also some new RCPPs that have easement money that may or may not survive. So, yeah, it's hard. It's a hard moment to be predicting the future on these.
And do we think private APR funding is going to be impacted by all of this? I know that's kind of been a long-time funding in the state. As part of that,
We're not the
They
person.
say they don't know.
Right, we don't know. Hopefully it would just be state money that could be available.
I'll just add to that our NRCS friends have still encouraged everyone to get their ASAP AL applications in. So yes, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but like most programs, you know, if we can continue to show the demand, right? If we get $10 million worth of farmland protection projects, and we can show the powers that be that there's the demand and there's interest from farmland owners, that's all for the better. So don't let this deter us all from continuing to get in good and strong applications.
Okay, we're going to stay for questions, but I do want to do my final plugs of what you can take away from today. If you are interested in sending farmers to these workshops, my colleague Jamie is planning those, and they are starting next week, so please talk to Jamie about those. They're across the state for farmers, free dinner. And this is the last slide here. The MLTC Ag Lands Committee is reactivating more now than previously, and you can contact me if you're interested in hearing about that. I'm reiterating this QR code, which you can use to sign up for that private online community, and then I'm going to turn it to Catherine for a brief plug about the Farmland Action Plan and the grant that just came out.
Hi, I'm Kathleen, also I'm the Farmland Action Plan Coordinator at ANDAR. The Farmland Action Plan was released in 2023, and we're in that first kind of year two of implementation. So the exciting thing is that this is an action plan not just for ANDAR, it's not just for state government, it's for all the partners across the state. And we're really excited to have the Farmland Partnership Program out there to help farm partners get involved in that. But you can also get involved with implementing the plan without being funded through this program. But basically, if you're interested, come see me, sign up for the newsletter. There's a lot of things happening, starting, already in progress, and lots more to come. So come speak to me and sign up for the newsletter. Thank you.
RFR is due May 19th.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. This is the last session, so I won't keep you.